Hello and welcome to this episode of the No Gimmicks Just Sweat podcast. First, thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you're listening. Also, make sure you follow us on Instagram at No Gimmicks Just Sweat. No Gimmicks Just Sweat was started to showcase people from all walks of life sharing their particular fitness journeys. Everyone has a different story, and everyone has a different reason behind their journey. Hopefully these stories will not only inspire you, but also help you aspire to heights you've never thought possible. Again, thank you for listening, and now, let's get it started. And welcome to the No Gimmicks Just Sweat podcast. And today we have Lee Clontz as our guest. How are you doing today, Lee?
I'm great, Eric. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure.
So, before we get started, I'm going to let's break the ice a little bit. I know you personally, but some of the people listening may not know you. So let's kind of throw out some rapid fire questions, just to kind of, get things started. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Morning runs or evening runs?
Oh, I'm morning all the time.
Run on a treadmill or run outside?
I would rather do almost anything than run on a treadmill. I love to be outside.
Okay. Solo runs or group runs?
I do most of my runs alone, but I do miss my running group in the pandemic. So I don't want to be non-committal, but I love both.
Okay. Road runs or trail runs?
Road. I'm a road runner.
What's your favorite run distance?
I really like for a daily run the 10K distance, and for a more a race run, I like the half.
Okay. If you can go for a run with any celebrity, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh wow, that's a great question. The thing that I most look for with a running partner is someone who can distract me from the discomfort of running, and so it would have to be someone interesting who can just talk. Peter Siegel, who is an NPR host, is a distance runner, and he's a funny guy, and he seems like the kind of guy you could share some miles with.
Oh, sweet. All right, last one. Dream location to run anywhere in the world.
I always want to say the beach because it's beautiful, but it's also not a great place to run because it's usually quite humid. So I really enjoy right where I am. I love Atlanta, and Atlanta's a great city to run in. And so I feel very fortunate to have such a great place that can be my daily run location. So I like being right where I am.
All right, sweet. All right, so Lee, I know you personally, but what's your story? So to kind of share that with everyone, I always kind of start out with a what's your story, because people go from one point to where they are now. And that's a good way to kind of show people that, you're relatable, to them. You know what I'm kind of saying?
Totally, yeah. It's really funny because I think if you had told me as a kid that anybody would ever want to talk to me about anything athletics related, I would not have believed you, because I did not come up as anything approaching an athletic person, however you define that. I grew up in coastal South Carolina. I'm 47, so I was born in 1973. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s in a very, I wouldn't say idyllic, but a really great time to be a kid and a great town to be a kid. I could ride my bike anywhere. Had a lot of individual autonomy and independence. So the 80s it was a very Goonies kind of existence, right? I mean, I got to kind of grow up doing largely what I wanted to do. The downside of that was I was a super chubby kid. Like, I was that kid in the class. And the downside of the 80s were that bullying was a very real thing. And so I definitely grew up feeling like athletics were something for other people. And so I put my efforts elsewhere, and I didn't come to running until much later in life. Luckily, my grandmother never drove her whole life. She was kind of legendary in our town for being a walker. She walked everywhere. And I think I inherited that from her. And I think that's the thing that got me out of chubbiness, and, to a more typical, body shape. But I really didn't discover like running as something that I felt like I could do until much, much later.
Okay. And you and I, we kind of talk and kind of say that, we kind of have some parallels. Like you, I was an athlete. I was active as in I played around.
Sure.
I went outside, I played and stuff, but yeah, I wasn't the guy that, was on the sports teams. I wasn't the guy that was picked first, in PE or anything. And so I can kind of relate to that. I was much smaller than, many of my classmates. I had a growth spurt like there, I think my 10th grade year, 11th grade year. That's when I kind of really started growing, getting a little height on me. And as you said about your grandmother walking everywhere, so did my grandmother.
Yeah.
Everywhere she went, she walked. When she went to work, she walked to work.
Yep.
She walked to the store. So I can relate to that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the big, I would play racquetball in college, but I never got into good habits. I never got into a regular habit like I have with running. And for me, the real turning point was about 11 years ago, I was asked to be in a study, a predictive health study with Emory University and Georgia Tech here in Atlanta. And one of the things that they did was like a complete like body analysis, like blood work, body composition, depression levels. It was like this comprehensive health assessment. And the idea was that they were tracking longitudinally over time changes in people's body numbers, essentially, to see how that tracked against later illness. So like if in year 4, let's say you had a heart attack, or let's say in year 4 you had high blood pressure, they could look back and say, oh, in year 2 we saw an increase in inflammation, and maybe that precipitates that. So I went through this thing, and it was, I went in kind of feeling like, oh, my weight is fine. My weight's pretty normal. I was right on the edge of like overweight, but not in any way that I was really concerned about. And they did a DEXA scan, which you probably had one, Eric, but if people don't know, a DEXA scan is basically like an X-ray of your body, but it also sees soft tissue and can give you a readout of bone density, how much fat you have, how much lean tissue you have, muscle tissue. And what it came back with was like, I had like no muscle, like at all. Like, even though my weight was fine, but I was like super low on lean tissue. Like I had none. It was a wonder I could stand up straight.
Oh.
And, there's a term, not a particularly nice term, but there's a term, skinny fat, which is like
right.
People whose weight is not in excess, but whose body composition is more, you have more fat on your body than you should for someone your weight. And that was me 100%. Like I was like almost off the charts with like low muscle. And that kind of freaked me out, to be honest. And so I started doing the P90X, the video program,
yes.
Which was great in a lot of ways. It taught me a lot. But honestly, after a couple of months of doing that, I was losing my absolute mind just working out in my living room alone. And, my wife and I joke about it now, but one day I just kind of was like, I think I'm going to go for a run instead of doing the video today. And I found that I liked it. And I really liked the feedback loop of, like you start off, you can run a block or two, and then the next time you go like 2 blocks or 3, and then the next time you go a little farther. And that positive feedback loop really caught me up in it. And so I started running a lot.
Okay.
And so that's really how I got into running.
Okay, and we've never talked about that, so this is my first time hearing this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because you and I were working together during this, and it was like it really freaked me out. I mean, like, you know, I lost my dad quite young. He was 53, and the idea of, like, you know, being around as long as possible for my kids. I mean, men in my family like tend to not have the longest lives, and so it was like, man, I gotta do something. And the fact that I liked it and made me feel good, you know, made it something that I could keep doing.
Yeah. Because when we worked together, I was in my chubby stage. If you could probably remember.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I mean, your transformation is unbelievable. I mean, it's wild. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I totally like. I think you're definitely someone to look up to.
Well, thank you. So we know you did your own thing with the P90X and everything. Mm-hmm. But did you ever seek out like a coach or a trainer?
So I, just by way of kind of what I do now, so I've really gotten into the marathon distance. I started doing like 5K back in 2010, and then moved to the 10K, and so I do the Peachtree Road Race every July. And I do 2 marathons a year, a spring and a fall. I've done 19, which is kind of fun. I have really found great success with a running group, which is not as personal as a coach, but the Atlanta Track Club is our local running organization, and they have, careful not to call them coaches, but run leads, you know, because I mean, they're not official coaches, but they're, you know, they're regular people who are just more experienced and can give you advice and can help you along on learning how to eat and learning how to pace yourself and learning how to train. And so I've never had a personal run coach, but I've learned so much from running with more experienced people in group runs.
Yeah, and you do, you know, and I've noticed that as well, that, you know, just talking with people, friendly, you know, befriending people at events and just having conversations, you know, connecting through social media as well, you know, especially with me in the duathlon area, you know, just, you know, because there's only so many people who do duathlons, sure, you generally kind of see the same people at each race. So you kind of develop some type of connection with them. And, you know, just kind of sharing ideas and stuff, you know, in the last 3 years, I've learned so much just talking to other people.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And, you know, the tools now, like you and I are friends on Strava, and I've got a lot of friends there. And like,
yes,
it's nice having social networks that are structured around like physical activities, right? So, I mean, there are definitely people I'm connected to on Strava that would be weird to be connected to on, say, Facebook or something, because, you know, like we kind of just track each other's run experience. And so that's a whole kind of different kind of relationship than, you know, are we friends? Well, we're kind of friends, but we're, right, you know, like this is our connection. And I really love that platform for that, you know, ability to connect over something as specific as, you know, that we do runs together at the same pace and we can kind of watch each other. So.
Okay. So what does a week of training look like for you?
So I typically run 6 days a week. You know, depending on where I am in my marathon training cycle, that obviously varies the distance a lot. If people haven't done the marathon distance before, typically what you'll do is it's about 16 to 20 weeks of training. And, you know, you do a long run on Saturday, typically kind of a mid-distance run on Monday. I usually take Sundays off. In fact, I almost always take Sundays off. And then a little bit shorter run on Tuesday, intervals on Wednesday, shorter run on Thursday, and then kind of whatever you feel like on Friday and prep for the long run on Saturday. So I stick to that pattern even when I'm not officially training. I just did the Publix a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not really training for anything yet. But I still I like the pattern of the, every morning before work run. And so I typically will run every weekday and Saturday.
Okay. Do you do any type of cross training?
So, one of the things I've learned over the years is like running is great for, general fitness, and it's good for weight management, and it's good for a lot of things. It does nothing for your upper body, and it does nothing for your flexibility. And those are definitely things that I'm having to work on more as a, who are we kidding, as a midlife, dad. And so I do some just hand weights. I do some body weight exercises. Probably not as much as I should. I should be doing yoga. I'm getting into a stretching routine now because I'm super not flexible, but not as much as I probably should. I don't enjoy it as much, frankly, and so it's always harder to do things that you don't, find pleasure in.
Right, you're a runner. You enjoy being outside.
I do. Yeah, that is just my happy place. So yeah.
All right, 2020 was crazy. So how has the pandemic been for you in regards to your training and your running, other than no races happening?
Yeah, I mean, I ran more this year than I typically do for, I think, a couple of reasons. One is, working from home. I've got a child in high school and a child in middle school, and I usually drop one of them off in the morning. So my mornings used to be more constrained in terms of time than they are now. And so now I really, have only myself to blame if I don't get up and get out before work. So in a way, it's been more, I've been more free to run more. I didn't used to run every weekday. I usually take a day off just because, getting up at 5:30 stinks, it's not fun. So now I can get up at 6:30 and still have time to get, a good, hour long or so run in, before work. Not having races, I would say was not great. I did my own marathon, I my wife was my water stops. I did that back in November, and that was fun. It was not the same, but it was fun. We just had the Publix Marathon, which was really the first formal race I've done in a year that was not virtual. And that was great. It was, done up at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, and it was socially distanced, and they really managed it well. It was different, but it was great. So, I've really kind of leaned into running over the past year, even more as just a way to get out of my Zoom tomb down here in my basement, and to just for my own mental health, honestly.
Right. So thinking back in all the years you've been running, and this is kind of a two-part question. What's your proudest moment as a runner, and then what is your worst moment as a runner?
I would say proudest is probably, I mean, in a way you never forget your first half marathon, your first marathon, your first 10K, it's all first 5K. Anytime you do something new is always really exhilarating. I did Chicago back in the fall of 2019. And that was a couple things. That was my fastest marathon. It was also the first time I'd ever run a marathon without stopping to walk at all. And that was a big deal for me because I always felt like I would run out of gas, and I never was able to dial in when to eat, when not to eat, and how to not to overtrain and not to go out too fast, and not, how to pace myself. And finishing a marathon really feeling like I'd done my best was just a great feeling. And doing it in Chicago, and such a cool city, and such a great, well-organized race, and getting a PR at the same time. That was a real great moment for me. I think in terms of, regrets, or, times I remember less positively, let's say, have been injured a couple of times. My first marathon, I probably wasn't fully prepared for. I was sick, and I just totally blew up. I mean, it's one of those where I probably should have not done it. I ended up with a minor stress fracture. I mean, it was a great day, and it was something I'm still proud of, but like, it was a real miserable slog of a day. And I think I had to do it to learn from it, but it was a real tough one. And I ended up in a boot for a couple of weeks, which was not fun.
Oh, wow. So kind of going back to the marathon, what tips would you give someone who is brand new to running and there goes like, okay, I want to run a marathon?
I think it's really important to look at a marathon like, I don't know, climbing a mountain or doing anything that is that is very ambitious in terms of what it takes to get there. I think anyone can do a marathon if they want to, but it is a real dedication of time. And if I'm being totally candid, if what you're running for is fitness, you don't need to run a marathon to get the physical benefits of running. Like you can run 5 kilometers a couple times a week, and you'll get probably 90% of the advantages of being a runner and have a lot more time in your schedule. So, I look at marathon running as more of a hobby than a fitness activity in a way. It's like a thing that I like to do, that I can kind of tweak my my inputs and see what the outputs are. It's like almost like an experiment. But if you want to do that, I would highly, highly recommend getting into a running group, because I joined this Atlanta Track Club training program, and they really took me through. They gave me a plan, because I need a plan. Otherwise, you're just kind of wandering out there on your own. There's a good community, and learning to run for 3 or 4 hours, doing it by yourself, you're probably going to quit if you don't have people there with you, supporting you, distracting you, making it fun. So I think having some community is incredibly important. And it's also, don't push yourself too hard at any one time. Like, listen to your body. It's probably obvious, but like, if you feel like you're getting sick, or if you feel like you're on the edge of an injury, like, it's totally cool to back off a little bit. Like, you're not going to lose your fitness in like a couple days or a week even. Like, it's more important that you stay healthy than that you stay on a schedule. And honestly, I think the biggest thing is like, it's the journey is the destination, right? I mean, the marathon itself is like the capstone, but by the time you've trained for a marathon, you've run 500-600 miles to prep for it. And that's really the part that's important. The marathon itself is just like the day. And frankly, your first few times, it's probably going to be rough, so, everybody says like, oh, you're going to like cross the finish line and it's going to be the best feeling ever. And in some ways it is, but it's going to hurt a lot. And you're probably going to be chafed in places that you don't even know could chafe. And I used to throw up, my first 5 or 6 marathons, I would throw up at the end. And, these things are going to happen to you because it's a huge adaptation. And so just, if that doesn't sound fun or something you want to get into, it's totally cool. It's totally cool to do halves. It's totally cool to do 10Ks. It's cool to do whatever you want. The marathon is just one way to do it. It's just a way that's resonated for me.
Okay. And you've known I've been running for 7 years, and I've never had a desire to run a marathon.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that I can't run one and prepare to run for one. It's just that I just never had a desire to do it. I think the way I'm wired, I kind of look at things and I'm like, okay, I want to be the best I can at this level first. Okay, I've reached the pinnacle here. Okay, what's the next thing? and that's the way it, it's not to say I'll never do a marathon, never say never. I was like, but right now, that's not something that's on my horizon to do anything.
Well, I'll be honest, Eric. I think that your path is probably the more holistically healthful way to do it. I mean, you teach classes, you have a much more, like if you're training for a marathon, in a lot of ways, that's probably 90% of what most of us can do, in terms of just like, there's not really a lot of free either time or kind of energy to cycle or to row or to lift weights. I mean, you need to do some of that, but it's hard to do it all. And so I don't blame you. I feel like that when I hear people say like, oh, I did a 50 miler. I'm like, not for me. Thanks. Marathon, I think, is as long as I will go. I may look back at this and laugh one day, but I think that's as far as I'm really. I've never finished a marathon and been like, man, I wish there was another one of these to do now.
Right.
So that's probably as far as I'll go as a distance.
Okay. So, important question here: what's your current or favorite go-to running shoe?
So the shoe thing is challenging. And, one of the things that I would say too, if somebody is looking to get into running really at anything more than the 5K distance, and maybe even that, is to go get your gait checked at a running store.
Yes.
I can't, like getting the right shoe is really critical. And, running shoes are not cheap, and you can't just like it's so much more efficient to have someone look at your gait and say like, oh, you need a sport shoe or you need a neutral shoe or whatever it is, than to just buy a bunch of shoes and see what works for you. And so I've been through a couple of different waves of shoes. I've settled on the Mizuno Wave Inspire. That's my go-to shoe, mainly because I have kind of a wide forefoot, and my forefoot swells a little when I run distances. And if my toe box of my shoe isn't wide enough, then I bleed through my shoe, and that's pretty gross. And so I found the Wave Inspires have really treated me well over the past probably 6 years since I started running in them, and so I'm pretty brand loyal to those now.
Okay.
I was just going to say, the downside of that is like I may be missing like some shoe that's pretty amazing that I just like am not willing to invest $150 to test. Like there's so much technology in shoes right now that it's kind of overwhelming. So I do wonder sometimes if I shouldn't try something new.
Well, yes. I'm into Hoka. That has been the shoe that has really gotten me over all the humps and everything that I've encountered as a runner. So I'm pretty loyal to them. And I know other people are like, oh, try this shoe, and I'm like,
yeah.
I just,
my neighbor who is a runner was telling me the other day that he's a Hoka runner too, and he's like, oh my gosh, these are like running on a cloud. They're amazing. They're so great. And I'm like I would love to try. I don't like to take shoes back if I've bought them because I don't know. I know you can, but I just don't feel like great about going through a lot of different shoes. But it's like, man, it's like I wish I knew someone who had like a fresh pair that I could just run around the block in and try in my size, because I understand they're wonderful. I just kind of like go with what has worked for me, and that's these Mizunos have been pretty great.
Okay, so this kind of goes back a little bit into the whole marathon thing, but just more in general for running. Both of us, we're in our late 40s. So what would you say, or what would your message be to someone that says, it's too late to start running, especially from a man's perspective? It seems with women, it's kind of easier, for them to run, to kind of convince them to run. Whereas men who have a lot of health issues as well, it's like, no, I'm not running. No.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people think that people are going to judge them by the way that they run. And when you start out, your form probably stinks. You get exhausted. You're going to be sweaty. You probably feel very exposed. But the reality is that no one cares. And the people that do care, are rooting for you, honestly, when I see someone who, is clearly, trying to get back in, you see often on in January, around New Year's, and then you see as the weather starts to warm up, people who obviously, have gotten out of shape in the winter. When you see people coming out, it's you feel really good for them because you're oh my gosh, this is you gain ability so fast when you start out. And that, man, if you just stick with it, you're going to feel great, but no one's judging you. And no one is looking at you and thinking that you shouldn't be out running. And on the off chance that someone has that thought, that's not your problem, that's theirs. And so I think that, starting really modestly, run walking is completely fine. There's a whole kind of, Jeff Galloway has a whole philosophy around doing distance races by alternating running and walking. And that's totally cool, man. The thing is just to keep moving, and so I would not feel the remotest bit anxious or self-conscious because, if somebody's sitting on their couch and they look out their window and they see you go by, they're the ones that are on the couch and you're the one who's moving, and you can be proud of that. And, it's the thing I would say is to just not try to do too much too fast, don't start running by buying, marathon training for dummies. Just go out and run around the block and see how that feels, and that's cool. Whatever you do is cool. It doesn't have to be, none of us are Usain Bolt, none of us are, Olympic runners, and that's fine. That's great. Everybody's got their own pace and everybody can feel good about that.
Okay. How do you want to be remembered as a runner?
My goal that way is really around longevity. I want to be able to keep doing this. There's you see these stories of these older folks, and I mean twice our age, who are still out there, running, still out there active, and I really want to be that person. And so my kind of philosophy is anything you can do today, you can probably still do tomorrow. And so that's why I kind of don't ever let up, because I want to maintain the level of fitness that I have. I'm never going to be some kind of, I'm not going to be an Olympian. The ship has sailed. But I mean, I love being able to do this. It's a real, blessing to be able to do this every day and to have this, ability. And so I would like to hope that, to the degree that anyone remembers me as a runner, it's just someone who didn't quit,
Okay. And I enjoy talking with older runners, and, it's amazing, they seem to, and I'm also speaking from the multi-sport perspective, that, when they pull up at a race or an event, they seem to be the happiest people in the world.
Yeah, I mean,
without a care or worry, they show up just as happy. They're as long as I finish.
Yeah, I mean, being able to do this, it is a very empowering feeling to be able to go out and run whatever the distance is for you. If it's, a mile, if it's 15 miles, if it's 50 miles, it's a great feeling to be I can do that, a lot of people haven't put in that work. It's not that they can't. I don't really believe in can't. It's, you just haven't put the work in yet. And if you put in the work, you can do it. I mean, it's human beings are biologically built for running. Like we can do it. And it's just a matter of getting yourself to that point in a healthy and sustainable way. So I always think, all the happiest creatures on earth, right? Like toddlers, dogs. What do they do when you put them down on the ground? They run, and we get in this place where, like in elementary school, it becomes like a punishment. It becomes like a thing. We get sent to run laps when we do something wrong. And I think that's just such a terrible message to send to like young people, that like, this is something that, you're going to be forced to do when you've violated some kind of behavior. And it's not that at all. It's a really great feeling.
Okay. All right. As we get close to the end, what is a non-running fact about you that most people don't?
Non-running fact about me. So I wrote a draft of a novel that I'm in the process of trying to get edited and to submit to agents, which is kind of fun and scary, and talk about things that are kind of like a marathon. I mean, it's a real process. Like, you kind of do an outline and you write and you write and you write for months, and you got to kind of keep your eyes on the end, but also keep your eyes on where you are. And so that's something I'm working on. That's a real kind of life goal, and so that's something I'm excited about in the future. We'll see what comes of it.
Okay. So, what's next for you? Are you training for anything now? Are you getting ready for?
So I'm going to do the Peachtree Road Race in July. I haven't figured out a fall marathon yet. It's not really clear what the marathon calendar is going to look like. I'll probably do something close by. I'm hoping it'll be like a real race, and if not, then I'll build my own route again and just do my own thing. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything right now. I'm just running for fun, running for fitness and to see the sun come up in the morning, which is my favorite thing.
Awesome. All right. Is there anything else that you want to touch on that you may have
I would say, my kind of just baseline advice would be run with people who like push you, but not too much, and support you. You can't have a conversation about running that doesn't get into bathroom issues. So I would just say, learn to like pack tissue, because you never know what's going to happen. And if you start running distances, you're going to get caught out at some point. So that's a hard lesson we all learn, but it's a really gratifying, satisfying way to spend your time, and there's just a wonderful community out there to hook up with.
All right, Lee.
That's so happy here. Thank you.
All right, if anyone wants to get in contact with you,
I'm on Twitter at Clontz, Clontz. It's my last name. And then, all the usual stuff. I'm not really much of a Facebooker, although I do have an account. I'm on LinkedIn, but Twitter is probably the best way. I'm on Instagram, but I'm not super active there. I'm Lee Clontz, the first name and last name together. But if anybody wants to say hey, Twitter is a great place to find me.
All right, cool.
All right, man. Sounds good.
Thank you.
You too. Take care.
All right, have a good one. All right.
And that's it for this episode of No Gimmicks, Just Sweat. I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for your support, and until next time, keep crushing your goals.